Hey, good evening, everyone, and happy Sunday night to all of you out there in Unlock the Middle Land. We are here tonight on our Sunday night feature show where we kind of dig into topics that are just so important in the field of education, but more importantly, stretch us as educators, leaders, people who are in the classroom working with kids. Hey, my name is Dean Packard. I'm the principal of Charlton Middle School in Charlton, Massachusetts. And alongside me, I have my good friend and co-host of Unlock the Middle, Christopher Starcheski, principal of Dudley Middle School. And we also have Josh Tovar, who's been a beacon of strength with us since we started as well, and a great cast tonight. Again, hey, Chris, how are you? We're going to kick this around the table. Sunday night's always a special night for us.
Yes, it is. Sunday night's usually the end to the weekend, but it's really the beginning to the work week. We start to get our minds set and our bodies ready for who knows what's going to come on Monday morning. But this is a great opportunity for us to kind of center ourselves professionally and personally and get ready to enter into this work week in the middle level education world that we're in. We've got some great guests with us tonight, Dean. We've got Josh, who's a staple. We've also got some great new faces and an old face. Alfonso Mendoza, welcome. Paul Solarz, Amanda McCarthy, Lindsay Franenfeld, and Dr. Drew Tomlin. I'd like to kick it up to Fonz and then work our way around the screen so you can introduce yourselves to all of our guests and get a feeling for who you are and what you do. Fonz.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I appreciate the invite. And again, it's wonderful to be here with wonderful, passionate educators such as yourself, and especially those that serve the administrative role. And I know you both for because you were guests on my podcast, My Tech Life, and of course, Josh as well. But I'm lucky to be here and connect with Paul, Amanda, Lindsay, and Drew, and making those connections. I am an instructional software specialist from South Texas, south of San Antonio. Believe it or not, there's still Texas below San Antonio, and I am from McAllen, Texas. I serve this district called Sherryland ISD, 14 schools altogether. This will be my 5th year in the role, but I've been a teacher for 11 years, classroom experience. So I'm excited to be here with you all tonight.
Great to have you.
Awesome. Welcome, Fonz. Paul.
Yeah, hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Really honored to be here. I'm Paul Solarz. I taught for 20 years. I was a 4th and 5th grade teacher in Arlington Heights at a school called Westgate Elementary. And I just recently retired to take care of my mom, who's recovering from some strokes. And I'm writing my second book. The first book was Learn Like a Pirate, which was kind of the companion book to Dave Burgess's Teach Like a Pirate. And this new book that I'm working on kind of tackles some of the skills like self-assessment, which we'll be talking about today, and about 7 others. So I'm excited to be here and talk about something I'm really passionate about.
Brilliant, Paul. Excited that you're here. Amanda.
Hi, Amanda McCarthy. I'm from Northeast New Jersey. I'm a science teacher for 8 years right now. 2 years in a magnet school, and then 6 years in a public school. And I'm also a head field hockey coach. And currently I'm the community manager at Floop. So worn many hats in the education field. It's great to be here and have this night conversation with all these great educators and leaders in their fields.
Great to have you.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, welcome, Amanda. So excited to hear that you're not just a classroom teacher, that you're getting involved beyond the classroom life in the school. So very important. Also so very taxing. So thank you. Lindsay.
Hey, I'm Lindsay, and I live in Rapid City, South Dakota, which is western South Dakota, in case people aren't familiar with the state. And I taught English as a second language in a fairly rural school district in this state for 10 years. And before that, I was teaching in Japan, English as a foreign language in Hakodate, Hokkaido, Japan, which is the North Island. And now I'm a feedback literacy mentor for Floop. And I'll talk a little bit more about what feedback literacy is as we get into this conversation. But I'm really excited to be here with everyone. And thank you for having us.
So excited. Thank you for joining us. I'm really intrigued to learn a little bit more about Floop. Dr. Drew. I'm sure you've never heard that one before.
Hey, so I'm Drew Tomlin, principal of Heritage Middle School in tropical Westerville, Ohio, right outside of Columbus, Ohio. This is year 27 for me. So started out way back in 94 in Harrisonburg, Virginia, Harrisonburg High School, the #2 poultry capital of the world, just in case you're voting on that. And then I was in right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, Fulton County Schools, Forsyth County Schools in 98 to 2013. And then I went with AMLE. I was with the Association for Middle Level Education as its Director of Middle Level Services from 2013 to 2017. But then I was like, I got to get back in the schoolhouse. And that's where I am right now from 2017 to currently, like I said, at Heritage Middle School and Westerville City School. So again, just happy to be with the crew. And all right, there we go.
Great to have you. And we saved the beacon for last. Josh Tova, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Josh Tova, proud principal of Memorial Pathway Academy. Greetings to everybody as we start our 10th week. 10th. And we're about to have a week off. But you know what? There's never a time off when we're preparing the future for this country. This is why we're here tonight, making sure that we're stronger together, learning from each other, and most importantly, spreading it out from one coast to the other one. Because you know what? We're only stronger together.
You're absolutely right, Josh. Hey, I'm really excited myself. And Chris and I have been doing this for over a year now, and we've been honored to have people on and just learn. You sit in a seat, whether you're a leader or a teacher, you got to have a continuous mindset for growth and what that looks like. And that's by getting yourself out of your comfort zone, talking to people, and trying to expand as often as you can. And speaking about expansion, let's talk a little bit tonight about self-assessment. It's a huge, huge piece to be able to unpack. So I want to kick it right over to right out of the gate to Paul. And we have our guests tonight, Paul, Lindsay, and Amanda. They're going to kind of take the lead, and we're going to chime in as we go along. But let's talk about self-assessment. What does that mean, and why is it important in the field of education? I mean, I'm just going to back away now. Paul?
Yeah. Well, for me, I thought it would be good to start off with just self-assessment and self-grading, just so we know the difference when we're talking about this today. So for me, the way I describe self-assessment is having students internalize what they've done, decide if they've done something well or poorly or anywhere in between, and make decisions going forward. So I take it as a past, present, future kind of lens. Self-grading is more of a at the end kind of thing. So you just finished working on something, there's an answer key, let's grade, I'll have the kids grade it themselves, or I'll have the kids use the rubric and score themselves. There's some self-assessment maybe in there, but self-grading is going to be for the ultimate goal of knowing right and wrong, knowing, if you're done or if you need more work or whatever. So for self-assessment today, I think the main point that I wanted to share was that I think we're talking more about what did I do well, what did I do poorly, everything in between, and where do I go from there?
Lindsay, take it and run.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about how, when I was teaching language, when my students would self-correct, that was the ultimate goal. It's better if a student makes an error or a mistake and then corrects it themselves than if they did it perfectly. And if there's some way to give that, celebrate that and make that more rewarding even than getting 100%, I think that's the goal. That's my goal. And even years ago, I taught reading recovery for first graders and a different age group, but I think it still applies. That was the goal, is if they read through a book perfectly, that wasn't really what we wanted. All the feedback, all of the practice that they were doing was to get to that place where they would make an error and then self-correct it without prompting. It was like, yes, that is what we want. So
think of the teacher acting as a facilitator to the process and allowing the student to be able to look at a piece of work, take writing, for example, and rewrite and reconstruct and break it down and become stronger at it. All of a sudden, that becomes a bigger piece of the overall learning journey. Absolutely 100% correct.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, chime in.
So It's funny. I've been thinking about, since I started this position at Floop, I've sort of been thinking about feedback and
Hold on a second.
What
is Floop before you go forward?
Oh, yeah.
So anybody who's out there, Floop, I didn't know what that was at first.
So, yeah, sorry. So Floop it's a web app that helps teachers give feedback 4 times faster than they could before. They can drag and drop comments. Students can upload images, docs, basically any work that they would submit any other way. They could submit it through Floop, and then teachers can give like spot annotated feedback. There's also a feature that allows for peer feedback. You can give anonymous scaffolded feedback to each other. So I don't know, that's kind of like in a nutshell, I guess, what Floop is.
Okay. Now let's go back to where I rudely interrupted you.
No,
you had a thought and I derailed it. So let's hear where you're going with your self-assessment and this personal growth of doing this over again by kids and teachers.
Right. So I've always kind of used self-assessment in my classroom. So middle high school science teacher, I love using like single point rubrics for students to do self-assessment along the process. But since I've started this position at Floop, I've been sort of thinking about it in different lenses, professional lens, and then I'm a coach, like I said, so even like the coaching lens of it. And Lindsay and I were talking about this self-assessment the other day, and I was just thinking about how like how she feels like her students being able to self-correct. That's kind of how I feel about my players when they can help each other or notice something they did wrong. When I hear them saying things that I always say on the field, it's always like, oh, I guess they finally understood what I was trying to say. So I know not necessarily the same feedback as in the classroom, but it's the same goal. You want them to learn and grow, and it's awesome when they can finally assess themselves and see their own growth.
I'd love to hear that.
Just a real quick chime in. Today in a baseball game, we got our clocks cleaned. We got absolutely destroyed, 13-0, and the kids were playing well, but they really weren't playing as they had been coached. And as we came in from the dugout into the dugout after every couple of innings, you could hear the kids talking about what they weren't doing well and what they needed to do better. And it was interesting. They just got their clocks cleaned and there was nothing they could do. They were just outclassed on the field, but they were grinding, they were talking, they were thinking, and they were utilizing a lot of the language that we had used in practices along the way. So I think that coaching mindset really comes a lot into play here. Just 2 cents.
Well, what if we take it up to a level and we talk a little bit about self-assessment from a leadership standpoint, or Fonz, take a look at where you're at right now, what you do from your perspective for technological integration in your district. How do you self-assess? What does that look like? I mean, we all have to write goals. We all have to be able to be aligned on where we're going with a strategic action plan, but how does that pertain to us?
Yeah, no, exactly. I was really jotting down some notes as we were talking about this. And for me, it's definitely something that you have to set. And more than anything, coming in from an instructional software specialist point of view, it's like you have to train teachers how to do this. I mean, right now, there's a plethora of buzzwords that are out there. You've got the next buzzword and the next buzzword, but yet teachers really don't dive in deep, or there's a clear explanation because everybody's got a different interpretation of what self-assessment is. Even just the term, it's like, oh, they're just going to be testing themselves or doing these things. So definitely for myself, my job is I always try to simplify things in terms that they can understand. Coming from an education standpoint and being in the classroom 11 years, I want to facilitate those things and facilitate those strategies so we're all on the same page. And like you said, Dean, it's very important that this falls in line not only with our school plan, but with our district plan as well. As you oftentimes see those pocket of innovative teachers that go out there and do the research and trying the next new app and so on, but then they don't really dive into what we already have in place. And sometimes I feel like they're just adding more work to themselves. But it's important, though, the self-assessment piece. And even as educators, myself with teachers, I would definitely want to make sure that they're self-assessing with the instructional standpoint and the ed tech life that I bring to them, that they're able to use that. And that helps them see what they can do possibly a little bit easier for themselves and make sure that they correct themselves too on certain ways. But that also gets passed along to the students as well. I mean, you definitely have to build that culture where we are all connected, and it's just not one person just saying this is what needs to be done, but that we're all doing it together. So that's what I bring to in my place, you know, to be that middleman between curriculum and instruction, and of course in the classroom, and hopefully this getting down to the students as well.
Dr. Tomlin, 27 years in education. How do you self-assess to become better? You think about it. If you've been on that journey for a long time, it's hard to find and rewrite new goals that push you to become stronger. I've been in 28 years myself. This is year number 28, 20 in administration. You know, it's not easy.
No. And, you know, I was thinking about that from everybody else's standpoint. I just want to say thank you. All your thoughts are just like making my mind, all my synapses fire, you know? So thinking about like how we set goals and do self-assessment from a literacy standpoint. You know, when I was back teaching English language arts to 9th grade basic English students, you know, doing writers and readers workshop, doing self-assessment at the beginning of every single class, asking students what goal they wanted to set and then giving themselves grades at the end of the class. Like that was part of our structure of a class. And what that did for our students was it gave them, you know, that voice and that, you know, sense of, oh, I get to choose how I think I did. And then I'm thinking about that now from a leadership perspective, helping our young adolescents self-assess with behavioral choices. Because unfortunately, a lot of my day is taken up with student behavior and those kind of choices. So how do I help students, just like reading a book or just like reading a story, how do I help them read a situation and evaluate that situation and self-assess with how they read it and how they responded to it? You know, that behavioral literacy piece. So, and I think the question I think that was in there too was, when do you find time to do it? So like, I don't know if this is a term or not. I'm going to do a mic drop moment. I don't know. Is there such a thing as micro assessment? Where like, you have to find like, it should have macro impact, but like you only have small minutes in the day to like assess how's this going? How's this going? And then what changes do I need to make? So I don't know if that really helps, but that's my thought.
Drop the mic. You're spot on. You know, it's funny that you say that, because there it goes. Because of the fact that, you know, we have our students, at least in my building, I have them create their own goals for each term. And they have to do an academic, a social, and emotional goal. Because if you don't have a bona fide target that you're shooting for, you wander aimlessly throughout your journey. And no matter what you do, teachers are writing SMART goals as well, student learning goal, professional practice goals. These goals are so important to help drive what we do every day. Mr. Tovar, technology good? You're smiling right there. Nope, he's in and out. He's coming back. There must be a storm down in Texas. That's all I can think of. Oh, there. I think he's back right now. Let's see. Principal Tovar, are you there?
Yeah, I have no idea. The gremlins are in my system right now. And just on some of the things that I've heard, and I apologize for the internet connection, it's pretty much a different angle that I was thinking about as everyone is dropping mic there and everything, is making sure that the people that sit in our chair provide the opportunity for, and we'll address this later on in tonight's topic about the growth mindset. We need to provide the safety blanket for everybody and use this COVID time, not as a crutch or as a negative, but in a way to rewire the system in a way that everyone feels that we could support each other. When I say stronger together, that's not just a hashtag, that's a reality, because it doesn't matter what kind of campus you're at. We're all facing the same adversity. Doesn't matter if it's an IB school, an AP school, fine arts school, or a low performing school. We're all facing the same obstacle. And now there is a concept of a learning gap because of the kids not having the infrastructure, not having internet at home for the last 2 years, year and a half. We need to use this whole situation to provide a safe environment as a leadership point, letting them know it's okay to mess up. You know what? Let's rewire this. How are we going to be doing this? How can we take this micro moment to see if we've advanced with portfolios, with team, peer student-to-student evaluation, whatever it is. But it all starts and ends with our chairs making sure that we provide that safety comfort for the restructuring of the system.
Let's take that one step further. Okay, so self-assessment is really important. There's no doubt about that. How about feedback? How important is feedback from somebody who works right above you or laterally with you, or even from the person who's the consumer of what you're doing? Feedback is essential for overall growth. And I think in education, at least from where I've been in the 27, 28 years I've been here, it's difficult to provide feedback at times for people because in this business, we all think we do a pretty good job with what we do. And I'm sure that's not only to education. If you're in the private sector, it's the same thing. But let's talk about feedback for a second and really peel that back. And Paul, why don't you start off with that?
So I want to come at it from a student perspective, if I could, because for me, that's pretty much where I start. I always think, how can I teach my students to do these skills? So in this case, give feedback and receive feedback are the two skills that I really want my kids to learn. So for us, we have an environment, a classroom environment where students are constantly working collaboratively with everyone. I actually assign partners randomly because I think that all my students need to work with everybody all the time and they need to get along. So I don't actually let them pick their partners very often, once in a while. And the goal is you start to learn the difficulties of each other and you start to learn what people are good at and what they might be poor at. But the idea with feedback is I teach my kids that we all have something valuable within us that we can provide. You might not want to come to me for maybe a math, some help with math or something, but you need to know I'm really good with technology and I'm really great at spelling or something. You're going to find my niches and you're going to find each other's niches. And if you don't do that, and you end up with one or two students being the feedback person and they're just becoming the teacher is really what's happening. And that's not what you want. You don't want 3 teachers in the classroom. You want 25. So the goal with us is I teach them with skills. This next thing I'm working on, this next project is about 35 lessons for each of these different skills. And feedback, there's easily 5 sections of feedback. First of all, what is it? The value of it, and then we need to learn about how to give it, how to ask for it, what to do with it once we've gotten it, how to synthesize it with all the other things that we're learning and getting other feedback, and then monitoring it, making sure we don't go backwards. But you have to do that, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit later too. But the idea of you don't accept feedback from people you don't respect. You don't accept feedback from people you don't like. So the social emotional component has to be a huge part of all of this, because if you don't teach them to appreciate each other in some sort of way, you're not going to be able to have a feedback community. And our classroom, we called it an improvement focused classroom. That's what I called our classroom. It was never about mastery. That's not what I fought for. I knew some kids would struggle with mastery for some skills, but I know that every one of my kids could have improved. And so I never had trouble with effort. They all worked their tails off. It was never a problem of motivating them, but I wanted them all to feel successful. So that kind of thing, that all goes together. It's hard to talk about feedback without all that other stuff.
I like the term continuous growth, because if you think of it through that lens, it's not mastery, because everybody's on this journey at a different place. And I love the fact that you said, and the learning journey, it can be done with people around you, and that's okay. And I think that's a very important thing to do. Something we talk about later on is assessment. And is that okay to do that with somebody around you? Because the ultimate goal is to learn the material, not to be able to regurgitate it. But that's a whole nother story. Lindsay, feedback.
Yeah, well, feedback is such an important component to this system that might result in the self-grading, and I was thinking about a course that I taught was for teachers in South Dakota, and I had an option where they could self-grade their final paper, or I could grade it. And I only had 5 takers out of 35 students, and I realized I learned 2 things. One is that a lot of people wanted my feedback, I think. And 2, I hadn't really set up a system beforehand or incorporated self-reflection enough so that a larger percent of the people wanted to do that at the end. And maybe it would have been better for it to be required, or just as a way for me to demonstrate the value of that. So I think I was learning in that process when I've been reading Paul's book, And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that system that you set up with your students and just the respect that they have for each other is so incredible. And that's what we need to create in order for students to feel comfortable self-assessing and self-grading, and just learning how to be able to give feedback and receive it. That's part of what feedback literacy is like Paul was talking about, learning not only the language, like there's some scaffolding that we can provide, but also how to manage your emotion around it. I just received some feedback last week, and I'm all about feedback. It's so important to me. I'm working with this company that is all about feedback, but my initial reaction was like kind of defensive, even with all of that background. So it was kind of cool to catch myself and then be like, oh yeah, this is valuable, but I think it takes a lot of practice.
It does. You have to feel free from, the risk of doing something that you didn't think you were doing. And that's hard to do, especially in education. But I'm glad you brought that up, because those are difficult conversations. And we've had shows on that in the past too. Lindsay, Amanda.
So I love that Paul brought up creating like a culture basically of feedback. And I feel like in my classroom, that was always so important to make sure my students were comfortable. And I feel like until they were comfortable to give and receive feedback from me, then they wouldn't be comfortable doing it with each other. So I think it all starts from there. And then at the school level, like that starts with the administrators. I feel like the teachers aren't going to be comfortable getting and receiving feedback from each other or their administrators if that culture isn't built within the system. I did an ed leadership master's, and one of the books we had to read was called Thanks for the Feedback. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it was an excellent book about giving and receiving feedback. And it goes back to, I think, Dean, what you said before about like if you don't like the person that's giving you the feedback, or maybe Paul, you said it, or if you don't respect that person, it affects the way you receive the feedback. And it was more written not in the educational sense, more in like the business world kind of sense. But I think that's why it's so important that we teach our students how to give and receive feedback, because it's not just about in school. You need these in life. I mean, Lindsay, you just gave an example. I'm sure we all have that example where like we got on edge when we got feedback from someone. So you need those skills through life. And I guess that also will kind of come back up when we talk about SEL a little bit later. But
I love that you said that, because even in my position and being a principal for the last 13 years, when I received some feedback, doesn't matter from who gave it to me, I was like, are you sure? And it put me back on my heels because of the fact that I really thought I was seeing. It took a moment for it to resonate within me to say, okay, if I'm going to build my capacity, I've got to let go of what I think I do control and look at it through another lens. Speaking of another lens, Fonz, how about you for feedback from where you sit?
Well, it pretty much, it resonates straight across. Like you said, these are skills that you need at any level. And me coming from the business background, and getting into education, the feedback was something that's very important. But you guys hit on a lot of points here that I took notes of. And really, when I was in the classroom in those 11 years, number one thing was building that relationship and that structure and that culture in and making those connections with my students, because then when I did give feedback, they knew that it was from somebody that truly and honestly cared, not only about how they were doing with the academic success, but with the personal success. So it's just like Josh Tovar says, it's like, hey, you believe connection before content, like from Ryan Scott, they're going to believe you. They're going to take that and they're going to work for you. And those 11 years going from high school to elementary, that was the culture that I really try to build in there. But also it's important to note, like, is this feedback, or are you just kind of like blaming me, or kind of like, being a little bit tougher? Feedback is different. You're there to build people up, or are you there to really just crush them and like, really just make them feel terrible? Because sometimes there could be those horror stories, from admins doing that to other teachers as well. But, my rule was always, and maybe you've heard it, was the sandwich rule when you give feedback. It's like you start them off with something that's good, Then in the middle, you kind of put something that they can work on and build on. And then the top layer is ending on some good stuff. You're adding a little additional seasoning to that sandwich, that at the end, you build up this nice, big, juicy sandwich where you build them up. You told them the great things they're doing. You told them some of the things that they need to work on. But then in the end, you finished off together, stronger, and with some goals in mind to continue moving forward. And I think that's something that's very important, because that really sets them up for a delicious bite of success for sure.
Dr. Tomlin, feedback from your lens, principal.
Dang, now I'm hungry. I want that sandwich, And I mean, I do call that's like the Mary Poppins effect, right? Like a little spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, right? So, yeah, when I think about that feedback piece, and this is going to sound kind of cliche, but I was thinking about that it really should be feed forward. That it's got to be something to move people forward. And it's like you said, Dean, at the beginning, like there has to be a goal, there has to be a destination. Because if you just give feedback or self-assess without some sort of an aim, then what's it really all about? And then it can't be feedback that holds people back, right? It can't turn into junk in the trunk. That like, we need to make sure that kids feel like, hey, they're giving me this constructive feedback, or a teacher, I know this person is giving me feedback because it's part of our culture. It's a constant reciprocal dialogue that we have in our school. It's not something to hold me back, but it's something to help me propel forward. And to go back to that sandwich metaphor, like it can't be a cold sandwich. It can't be something that's shrink wrapped, somewhere like that in some Ziploc bag. It's got to be served up warm, like a grilled cheese sandwich with some nice, nice gooey cheese in there, because it has to be relationship centered, right? It's supposed to build and foster. And that's why it's particularly that's why we're talking about it in Unlock the Middle and not just some other grade level show. Like young adolescents need that type of reassurance that people are giving me feedback as they continue to advocate for me as a young adolescent. So that's why I think it's particularly important. It's got to build self-efficacy, which then builds agency, which then helps them generate change in their own lives and in their communities too.
That's a mic drop right there, because I think you hit on all the buzzwords. Well done. Josh.
The only thing I would like to add to that is somebody that sits in our chair from the administrative point of view is the visibility in the classroom. So if you're not in the classroom and then you just drop a snapshot evaluation, what you want to say, without any feedback afterwards or anything, either any way of corrective or not corrective, whatever semantical term you want to use, then you're just going to leave the whole classroom environment for them to fill in the gaps. If you're never in the classroom, then kids will act differently if you do go into the classroom, that rarity. If you make it a constant habit, a pattern of behavior, like I always talk about, the patterns of behavior will establish the climate and the culture of the classroom and or the campus. So as an administrator, you always need to be in that classroom, because you know what, even if it's a formal or informal observation, you still get a big picture of that classroom environment for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever it might be, if you keep on doing it over and over and over. And then you have those side conversations in the hallway during transition time, in the cafeteria. Hey, I like the way your lesson frame was up there. Hey, when you were in the power zone, I like the way that you asked back up the follow-up questions. Those kind of comments create the positive culture for feedback. Not just here, this is what it is. Because then that later on creates a big obstacle in having those awkward conversations if you have to have them with a team member that's not doing the best instruction for kids. So for me, from someone that sits in my chair, it's being constantly in the classroom, either formally or informally, and informal or formal, and having the feedback to your team members.
And there's no threat to what you're saying. And in fact, you're building capacity by doing it in a positive way. What are the things to do, Josh? Smart.
What's kind of resonating with me around the idea of feedback and getting better. We're all principals, administrators, classroom teachers. We've all got some leadership role in middle school. Back in like 2010, 2012, somewhere around there. We were all talking about active learning strategies, right? And how do you get the kids to really take ownership and have an authentic embrace of their learning and control of their learning, that autonomy. And, we talked about the ideas of giving very prescriptive and specific feedback in order to move them forward. Well, as a leader, and, Dean, I've been in the game for a while too. This is year 27, an administrator, not quite as long or as seasoned as you, my friend, but I'm pretty darn close. And what I really value with feedback is that idea of how I can take someone else's success and make my practice or my school better because of their experience. I'm hungry. I want to know. You give me that specific direction or that real prescriptive idea, I'll find a way to fit that in. I'll find a way to fit it into my style. I'll find a way to fit it into the classrooms around the building, but I won't do it as a force feed. Josh, you nailed it, man. Visibility, understanding of where folks are at, and sometimes it's just a little spoon feed. Have you seen what Joey down the hallway's been doing with his kids, or her Sally with hers? Did you think about ever trying this activity with a little bit of a shift to it? I got this great video out on TeacherTube that you might want to check out. It might be really kind of fun and it's exciting. And then all of a sudden they try it and they're like, hey, that wasn't too bad or too scary. I wonder what I can do next. You know, that little spoon feed idea is super helpful. And for me as a school leader, that strategy works really well with me too. Just give me an idea and I'm open, which kind of brings us into the next idea here, this idea of growth mindset culture. You know, how is it that we can avoid stagnation and, you know, continue to improve, but also continue to do things a wee bit differently? Who'd like to kick us off with growth mindset culture?
I'll jump in.
Sweet.
You know, I think that's super important. If we're going to focus on this improvement idea over mastery, we have to believe that we can all improve. We have to believe that we can grow. And by the time I get some students in 5th grade, and I'm coming from the student perspective, some of them have already felt they've been put into a niche. They're either the smart kid who gets straight A's and they already know that they've got it kind of easy for them, or they work hard and they don't mind it, or they feel as though they are not going to be successful in certain areas. And so it's my job to, first of all, open their eyes and say, all of us are going to hit roadblocks. All of us are going to find success. It's going to be different for everybody, and it's going to be, you know, we just all have to be open to it for whenever it happens. But what I also believe I need to do is I need to level the playing field a little bit, because when you've got kids who think that they're the best, which it's good to have good self-esteem. I'm not crushing kids. You know, self-esteem is important, but when they think that they're always going to be the ones, you know, like I led 4th grade, I led the class in 3rd grade, I'm the leader, you know, like you have to teach them, although you've got these skills going, and I'm so proud of you for that. I also need you to learn some following skills, and I need you to learn how to teach others your leadership skills. I never want you to stop being a leader. I never want you to whatever, but it's all about like passing it forward and going above. So in our classroom, I have to get the kids who don't believe in themselves to start to believe in themselves too. So I always say, while we're working, whoever can help anybody needs to help everybody, and don't be shy. And yes, once in a while you'll make a mistake, and you know, that may cause the other person some trouble, but I guarantee you I'll be more proud that you tried to give some help to somebody or provide feedback to somebody, even if it was wrong, than if you always stay silent or keep to yourself. And I have to teach my kids that when they were in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, their teachers said, mind your own business, quit worrying about other kids. And I had to say, in our classroom, you have to throw that out. In our classroom, you worry about each other, but you don't look to blame. You don't say, that one's doing it wrong, that one's, you know, like causing trouble. It's not that thing. It's if you notice somebody struggling and you get it, stop and go help them, because I would do the same thing, but I can't go and help 25 kids at the same exact time. So our classroom's all about like being aware of yourself, being aware of others, and then being like, you get to make the decision yourself. You go decide. Right now, I'm on, you know, the 15th problem, and this person's not getting number 1. I'm going to stop because I'm pretty sure that I'll be okay, and I'm going to go help them. And just that kind of concept is important. And I'm telling you, if you really make that your culture, the kids who didn't believe in themselves at first really begin to believe in themselves. They say, I know I can't really help you with that writing piece, but I know that I can help you with this technology thing or whatever. So that's what I think that's important for me. Growth mindset is the whole basis for all of that.
Get on the learning train. You just empowered everybody in that room to take a piece of the action. That's powerful. There goes the teacher in front of the class just dictating what needs to happen. You've allowed them all to move. Good stuff. Lindsay.
Well, I think that culture requires leadership. So teacher, like what you were just describing, Paul, creating that system, and or a system that promotes it. So I had an experience participating in a startup weekend. Has anyone else heard of that or been to one? It was an amazing experience. I showed up, and it's like you have 52 hours to create a business, and there are people. It's kind of like Shark Tank, but nicer. and you get into groups, and you work on a business, and you validate it, and then you do a final pitch at the end. And it was just having everybody in the same room, even if you're in different groups. Everybody there was all about this concept of failing fast, and failure is like the best thing. When you hear no, you learn more than when you hear yes. So that system is something I've always been wanting to see more of in education, and also that there was some urgency that created that culture too. And I mean, in any ways that can be set up in a somewhat natural way, you know, can help create motivation for students. But I also, another good example of feedback culture is as Floop, our CEO, Melanie. She's just so she's like all of our teacher. And you can tell at the company that all of us are learning, and it's a startup. It actually started at a startup weekend. And we do experiments every week. And so we'll meet and say, how did that experiment go? And we reflect on it, and then we adjust. So we're always tweaking. And that system that's in place helps everybody feel like you can take a little bit of a risk, and you can feel comfortable. You can, drive something, and that comes from leadership and the system.
Do you think we're always adjusting and tweaking in the classroom? I need to think about that. That would be the ideal school, in my opinion, if a teacher or a group of teachers felt compelled to be able to do that. Thank you for sharing that out. Right? And I think that's absolutely, my mind is resonating as I'm writing a bunch of notes here as you guys are all talking. Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you said that. I think that having the leadership in a school and building that culture of kind of what you said, Lindsay, about like failing hard, like it's okay to fail. For the students, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm a science teacher, so like that's where you learn from. In a lab, you learn from mistakes. That's where some of the best inventions have come from people making big errors. So, and I think as a teacher, and also probably for you all as leaders, like that's how you learn that this lesson didn't go that well. I guess I'll try something else next time, or like just being willing to try those things and being okay with failing. And not to go back to coaching or anything, but even as a coach, like I love when my players they want to work on a skill and they want to try something. The other day we were winning pretty handedly over another team, and at halftime I said to them, like, we're not going to keep like raising the score. That's not who we are. So I want everyone to pick something that they want to work on, and we're all going to keep each other accountable in the second half, and we're all going to, that's our goal. So every player, we went around, they picked something, and then at the end of the game, we talked about when someone did it in the game, everyone cheered, like, oh, look, she did that. That was great. So it just created this awesome culture around being okay with failing and also like growing as players, being able to take that risk to try something new.
You take that from the field to the classroom and you've got it. Yeah. You've got it down. Fonz.
Yeah, well, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, and being in the classroom, and you just reminded me of so many experiences. And even now, for me, it's just the growth mindset is just really providing that psychological safety for everybody. And this is kind of what we're all talking about, building that culture where it's okay to take that risk. And even if you fail, we can still work together and kind of celebrate. I mean, one of the things that this last year going through Google Innovator and getting chosen for that, I came in with a project that I was working on, and it wasn't quite going the way that I wanted to. So I had to ring what is called the fail bell, and I had to pivot. I just say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and pivot and go from what I was planning to do and pivot into something else. And I made an announcement, said, okay, guys, I'm ringing the fail bell. And everybody was cheering me on. They were like, yeah, all right. That's awesome. You found that piece, that component that you're going to go to now. You're going to pivot. And it was something that I wasn't alone in this. Everybody else was like, hey, we're with you on this, and we're proud that you thought you were going in one direction, now you're headed a different direction. So for me, what I've always learned coming from the business world is that growth mindset is all about knowing, number one, building that culture for those people around you and showing them yourself, being vulnerable and showing them that even though you have failed or failed forward or you just made that mistake, it's a stepping stone to success and you're just going to continue moving forward. And it's also for me just always showing them about my favorite 3 words: improvise, adapt, and overcome. And in my classroom, that was pretty much our motto for all our students. I was that guide on the side. Here's what we need to do. You guys get to work. And I was learning from my students as much as they were learning from me and showing them those skills on how to improvise if something isn't going correctly, how to adapt to the situation, and how to overcome those things. And they were doing it together as a class. And now that translates into my position where I talk to my teachers. That way, when I'm training them, it's like, hey, you know what? It's not always going to go as planned, but it's all about improvising, adapting, and overcoming, and just never stop learning, reflect off of what happened, take what is good, and keep moving forward from there, and then make some adjustments as needed so that way it's something that sticks and you continue doing well from there on out.
Dr. Tomlin.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a bevy of examples when it comes to student growth mindset, and I'm thinking about it too from my own growth as a principal with growth mindset and what I do on a daily basis to keep on growing. Because oftentimes in the principalship, it can be a very like principal island, right? Like, because you fear, and this is just me, maybe this is just my soft nougaty center of low self-esteem coming through, but like you fear that people aren't going to trust and respect you if you don't know everything, right? Like if you don't know the answer to everything, so then you fear asking questions. But what I found is like that's the most important part of school leadership is if you have an idea, go ask somebody. And gosh, don't just ask another principal. Go ask the people who are going to be affected by the work. You know what I mean? And so I think being vulnerable enough to ask good questions of people, that's helped me from a growth mindset perspective. Because if I just stayed in my little principal island, I'd never grow. You got to go ask questions. So I don't know if that. Yeah.
Drew, can you answer this question on the floor right now by Coach Central? This is a great question to throw out there because you're changing the shift of a building if you start to do what you do by feedback over systems. So think about that for a second. I mean, that's a big question. Any tips?
Well, I mean, it just goes back to that adage that it's about the people, not the programs, right? So you've got to, if you don't get feedback from your people, it doesn't matter how good your program is structured. So that's where, the smartest. So that's why, you got to ask questions. You ask questions I always ask questions of my custodians all the time. And I ask questions of my lead teachers all the time and just everybody about specific programs to see how they would be affected by this specific idea. Not to generate paralysis by analysis, because sometimes too much feedback can be like, oh my gosh, now what do I do with all this? But just you got to ask good questions.
That's good stuff. Josh.
The 2 things I would say is, number one, I guess I'm one of the older guys here with 29 years in the system. And I still say, hey, I don't know at all.
That's right.
I went from a 6A school with 2,500 kids to a school with 300. And I have no idea what goes on in that school with 300 kids because it's totally different. So I've learned one thing. It's better to ask questions from the people in the trenches and find out and then bring in your outside experiences. So I don't care. I feel warm and fuzzy saying, I have no idea. Let's work together on this. How can I bring my experiences to work in this new environment to make sure that we're all successful? And the second part that I would say is this. We just can't do hashtags growth mindset. We have to coach the concept. It's about coaching the game plan. When we say that, it's got to be repetitive. If you see, all I do is repeat myself with everything because you know what? Someone might not have heard at that moment I said it. So when I talk about growth mindset, you got to coach the situation. If you have a 67, let's redo that paper. And you know what? If you got a 73, that's great. You grew, you learned something different. It's about coaching, and not only for the kiddos, but also for the adults. Okay, power zone doesn't mean walk around in the middle. It means interacting with the kids and finding out, checking for understanding. Let's talk about perfect.
You talk to two kids. It's about being specificity with your feedback to show what a growth mindset is. And you just got to keep on repeating the song, because that's a game plan. That's exactly what the game plan is. And it's our job as coaches in our chairs to instill that vision on the whole body.
So self-assessment, self-grading, feedback, growth mindset, SEL skill sets. Think about this for a second, 30 seconds going around the table right now. The question I didn't ask you in the pregame, is it about the grade or is it about the knowledge of skills obtained? Okay, let's go. We're going to answer that question. Principal Starcheski, is it about the grade achieved or is it about the knowledge of the skills obtained? And you can take everything we talked about tonight to give me your answer. You got 30 seconds. Go.
Yeah, go. Start the timer, because I could talk for about 6 hours on my beliefs about standards-based grades versus traditional grading, Dean. I think the grading process is something that's a fallacy. It's some type of fictitious benchmark. We want to have individual growth with individual skills, and that's the stuff that we need to embrace and celebrate. Progress towards a standard and progress towards, really honing in on a collaborative understanding of how those standards work together at a very deep level. Always hard on the issues, soft on the people to help them move forward. Our kids, our teachers, our colleagues, and certainly, if we're a leader, we got to keep that in mind all the time.
Bonds.
All right. Well, for me, it's all about skills, guys. Like for me, I see things. This is a gig economy. I want my students to leave with the skills that they need for them to be successful, whether they want to be a TikTok star, YouTube star. If they want to do that, the things that they want to specialize in, that they can have those skills that can translate from not only the classroom, but into real world and make it relevant to them, into what they want to do. That to me is the most important. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of standardized testing at all whatsoever. It's a standardized test for multimodal learners, but it's a unimodal test. I don't think that that's very effective at all for me, and I'm a big believer in that. But for me, it's a gig economy. Find what you're good at, find what you're passionate about, continue to grow in those areas, take those skills from all of your teachers that they're passing on to you, and go out there and be successful and really, do what it is that you're passionate about.
Paul.
I was a grades-free classroom, so I clearly don't care about the grade. I had to give a report card, but I was always in constant communication with my students and my families, so they knew where their kids stood. If they got straight C's on a report card or whatever, they knew that they're not in trouble. That's where we are right now. I'm reporting out, achievement at that point. But we know that they're working hard and they're getting there. So I never had any battles with anybody about it. But the idea is, always go from your personal point A to your personal point B, and that's different for every kid, and that's why we differentiate, and that's why we personalize. And as a teacher, it's just my job to create an environment where kids want to grow and they want to take those risks. So for me, I'm all about skills, and I tell them that on the daily. I mean, we're never about a grade or a final stop. We're always about growth and skills.
Amanda.
I'm a big believer in skills. That was my favorite thing about the switch in science to the next gen standards, was that it was so much more focused on the skills and getting learning those science skills, and like Paul just said, like mastering them throughout the year. It wasn't about being able to do them in September. It was about being able to do them in June and growing throughout the year. So I think that it's all about growing. I gave grades because I had to give grades, but it wasn't about that for me. It's all about watching them grow throughout the year.
Lindsay.
Growth over grades for sure. And one clear way to do that is to make sure that feedback is given not with the grade, because when you give feedback at the same time as the grade, students are much less likely to look at the feedback or use it or act on it. So setting up a system where students are getting feedback before and a focus on the process instead of the end.
Principal Tomlin.
Definitely skills over grades. I think the only controversial point I'll add to this discussion is that I think we do have to, in some respects, prepare our students that we do live in a meritocracy. So until we dismantle that whole structure, that grades are a part of it. So I think we do need to make sure that our students are at least assessment literate and grade literate, because it is a part of the meritocracy.
Principal Tovar.
He just added what I was going to say. They got to learn to play the game also. If we're pushing higher ed, they got to learn to play the game. I hear you. I'm one of those kids that needed that assistance, and so they got to learn to play the game because the game is rigged up for a certain cut of guy from the 20th century. So we got to prepare the kids truly in all aspects for the future. Thank you for adding that, Doc.
I'm a huge believer in process trumps anything else. Outcomes take care of themselves. Your process is strong and you allow kids to be able to problem solve, discover, have inquiry within their learning, and utilize all the tools around them. Guess what will happen? They will grow and test scores will take care of themselves. I used to say that as a head basketball coach: practice hard, practice smart, have a plan, and good things will always happen to you. And I truly believe that. Hey, last thing we have to say, because we need to get going very quickly. What's Floop? How can they get there? We talked about that earlier on, and we wanted to learn just a little bit more about Learn Like a Pirate and where we can get that. So Floop first, Learn Like a Pirate, and then Chris will close us up.
Floop is floopedu.com, and it's an application. You can sign up you can do 10 assignments for free right away today. You can get started in 5 minutes, and it really is. Not only helps teachers give feedback faster with the drag and drop comment bank, but it also encourages students you can make it required so students have to dialogue with you about the feedback. So they have to look at the feedback before they can get their assignment or their grade. And then the peer assessment is an awesome feature as well.
Amanda, more to it than that, or did she hit it all?
I think Lindsay hit it all.
Okay. Good stuff. Paul, Learn Like a Pirate. Where can we find it? Where can you get it?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble and a lot of different other stores. But just so you know, it talks a lot about what we talked about today. The 6 chapters are how to teach your kids to collaborate properly. The second one's improvement-focused learning over mastery, although I know we have to work towards mastery. Responsibility in the classroom so that students are sharing what needs to be done, and it's their classroom, not just my classroom. Active learning, not in so much the sense that we referred to earlier in the year, but the idea that you learn better while doing rather than listening or reading. 21st century skills, which I know it's an old-fashioned kind of term, but the idea that now we focus on them rather than just allow them to happen. So 21st century skills are what drives my instruction, and it's within the curriculum. And then empowerment is the last chapter. So empower your kids to want to do this and to lead, and you've got this amazing environment where kids make so many strides.
Awesome. Paul, thank you. Amanda and Lindsay, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about Floop. Hey, Drew, middle grades mindset.
That's true.
A little bit about what it is and where we can get a hold of it.
Yeah, sure. So it's published through the Association for Middle Level Education, formerly the National Middle School Association. And so, yeah, you can get it through amle.org. And it's a lesson plan from A to Z. It actually uses the alphabet to go through just all the stuff that makes middle school awesome and what we can do to improve it from both. It's applications for teachers as well as school leaders. And spoiler alert, I go to the 22nd century skills. That's all I'm saying.
Ooh.
That's all I'm saying.
You're coming back for a cameo appearance on that one.
Hey.
Chris, we're on 57 minutes, brother. We got to close this up.
Love it. Well, hey, Fonz, Paul, Amanda, Lindsay, Drew, Josh, as always, a good friend, Dean. We had a great conversation tonight about assessment, feedback, growth mindset, culture, SEL, embracing. And we built a few new friendships tonight. So everybody out there in Unlock the Middle Land, be sure to hit up all of these individuals out there on social media, become a part of a great PLN. And, quite honestly, just keep on learning, keep on growing, and keep on working hard to be better. We are out. We got about 21 minutes before kickoff with Tom Brady back here in New England, everybody. And just be well, enjoy your work week ahead, and stay in touch.
Everybody stay on for a moment, please.